Chapter 117. Three of them came to the middle of the playground. Officer Leo, its cigarettes for Tige on himself. Han Yimo smiled awkwardly, then put the cigarette in his mouth and asked, "How do you learn this thing?" Officer Lee directly reached out and took the cigarette out of his mouth, then put it back into the cigarette box. "Learn nothing. Do you know how much I envy people who don't smoke now? This thing has only harms and no benefits. It's best not to know how to smoke. Don't ever learn it." Han Yimo was a bit confused. "Officer Lee, what you just said?" Kishaw waved his hand, interrupting Han Yimo's words, and then asked, "Han Yimo, what is the 7 black swords?" The Han Yimo's face froze. If Kishaw hadn't mentioned it, he would have almost forgotten that strange encounter. In the last cycle, he was pierced through the belly by the 7 black swords. Han Yimo paced back and forth a few times before looking up and saying to the two of them, 60 years ago, there was a world-famous punisher of evils in the martial arts world named Chu Qi. He wielded a heavy giant sword. Coupled with his elusive lightness skill, he rewarded the good and punished the evil according to his own preferences in the martial arts world. Those he deemed good were rewarded with 1 talent 7 kion of silver, and those he judged as evil would surely be pierced through the Dantian by his giant sword. For a while, people all over the world were in a state of panic, not knowing whether they were good or evil, and the giant sword he wielded was named 7 Black Swords because its blade, tip, spine, edge, hilt, and scabbard were all pitch black. Officer Lee was stunned as he listened. He took a step forward and reached out to knock on Han Yimo's head. "Hey!" Han Yimo was startled. "Officer Lee, what are you doing?" "I'm recalling things. Do you think this is my first time interrogating someone?" Officer Lee said helplessly, pursing his lips. "I can tell from your eyes that you made all this up. Tell me the truth." "I did make all this up," Han Yimo said a bit anxiously. "I put a lot of effort into making up these things." "Is this your novel?" Tijal suddenly asked. "Yes." Han Yimo nodded. "And my writing. This swordsman named Chu Qi was harmed by the wicked. I thought the martial arts world would return to peace, but I never expected that the 7 black swords didn't disappear from the martial arts world. It was still rewarding the good and punishing the evil in an elusive way. However, the person wielding the sword could no longer be seen. It was as if the sword had a life of its own and would always pierce people's Dantian at dawn." Officer Lee tried hard to accept this setting and then asked, "What does this have to do with your being killed?" "Blame it on my overactive imagination." Han Yimo lowered his head awkwardly. "Have you ever had such a feeling? The feeling that your imagination has nowhere to go?" Tijan shook his head after hearing this. "It's a bit abstract, to put it simply. There are too many things in my mind." Han Yimo pointed to his forehead. "I always feel that if I can't find an outlet to release the things in my mind, I'll suffocate. So I've tried many ways. At first, it was painting, but after all, I haven't received systematic training, so my paintbrush couldn't carry my imagination. So I chose writing." Officer Lee took a deep puff of his cigarette and smiled as he said, "I've heard that many people exhaust everything they have to become writers but don't succeed. Yet you were forced by circumstances?" "Pretty much." Han Yimo nodded. "There's a world in my mind, always waiting to pour out, so I can't stay in a closed environment, or my mind will wander uncontrollably." Kishaw seemed to catch something important and asked, "Are you saying that this sword is your wild imagination? It can only be like this." Han Yimo turned around and said very seriously, "On that pitch-black dawn, I was shivering all the time. I'm very afraid of dark environments, so I was worried that I would die there. Later, my thoughts took flight, and I even started to worry that the 7 black swords would pierce my Dantian as recorded in the story." Tijal was slightly stunned. This situation seemed familiar. When he was in the interview room, Han Yimo had also worried that the harpoon would pierce his body. If it hadn't been for He Aoji Ajin's intervention at that time, his nightmare would have come true by now. As a result, I really was pierced. Han Wai and Mo smiled bitterly. This place is really good. I suggest that all writers come here for a visit. Just stay here for a day, and they'll never run out of inspiration. No, that's not the issue. Officer Lee thought carefully for a while before realizing how unreasonable this matter was. According to what you said, the 7 black swords shouldn't exist in the world at all. It's just something you imagine. But why did it pierce you? I don't know. Han Wai Imo shook his head. That feeling was really strange. When I saw the 7 black sword, I was both happy and afraid. Every writer hopes that the world in their writing will become real, but when you really see the things in the book become reality, anyone would be afraid. Yes, this feeling was very strange. Tej touched his chin and began to sort out the logic. Hanwai Imo had a premonition that the harpoon would pierce him, so he trembled and was afraid. This situation was still within the understandable range. But what about the 7 black sword? Could it be that he had foreseen in advance that the 7 black swords would pierce him? So he had been afraid all night. But theoretically, this sword shouldn't appear. What was he afraid of? Calamity invitation. PXIA's eyes slowly widened. Wait a minute. Hunwai Imo could foresee danger in advance. Then this echo shouldn't be called calamity invitation at all. It should be called something like disaster avoidance or premonition. Instead, why was it called calamity invitation? Kijal suddenly felt as if he had been struck by lightning. All his previous inferences had been completely wrong. The harpoon wouldn't have pierced Han Wai Imo at all. The 7 black swords wouldn't have killed him either. All of this was because of Han Wai Imo's call. He thought the harpoon would pierce him, so that harpoon overcame all difficulties to pierce him. He thought that he would die under the 7 black swords. So even if the 7 black swords had to appear out of thin air in this world, it would still pierce his DNTN. As long as Hanwai Imo believed that a disaster would happen, then it would definitely happen. This was what was meant by calamity invitation. Tija slowly took a step back. The young writer in front of him made him feel extremely dangerous. He had thought that bringing him along could avoid disasters, but his existence was a living disaster. The second bell hadn't rung yet, and Hanwai Imo was still inviting disasters.